members at the funeral. Care homes were the centre of many a deadly COVID-19 outbreak in 2020 and 2021, if you remember, and families weren't permitted to see their loved ones then either. With me now is Penny Hutchinson from Halifax. Penny's a campaigner for care home residents. Her mum was in care during the pandemic. Morning, Penny.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning. With the COVID inquiry going on and from what you've seen from it, what do you make of what's been said?
Well, from a care home perspective, I don't think my or our views have changed. I think the implications of not allowing care home residents to have their loved ones, who often are essentially part of the care team, in to see them, was a big mistake. It was the wrong decision, and I think hindsight definitely shows that now. So obviously our focus now is to make sure that laws are put in place for that to never, ever happen again.
Tell me about the experience then, because, you're a campaigner for care home residents. Your mum was in a care home during the pandemic. What was it like for you and her and your family?
Horrendous. So for mum, ever since she has been in a care home, my brother, sister and I have always visited her at least 3 times a day, simply because mum can't speak for herself. So we are her eyes, ears and voice. And that's why we do. And we couldn't do that. We were either looking at her through a window or on an iPad, which of course mum didn't understand. When she was looking at us through the window or one of those horrible screens, she couldn't understand why we weren't touching her. So she was reaching out with her hand to touch us and we couldn't. I think the biggest challenge for us was we couldn't explain to mum. She couldn't understand why we'd gone from being so present and part of her care team to suddenly just not. Which is why we welcome now the new legislation that's been proposed, which will mean visitors can get into care homes, hospitals and hospices going forward. So we do welcome this new legislation, but it doesn't go far enough for us. And what we want to see is what we've been campaigning for, which is Gloria's law, which would be different. It would be a primary regulation, which would guarantee anyone in a hospital or care setting would always have the support of at least one essential care supporter. Right. So the difference there is that the new legislation that's currently being proposed focuses on visitors, and we are highlighting the massive difference between a visitor and an essential care supporter.
Of course, yeah, it's a huge gap between the two, isn't it? Really, that you're trying
really
to talk about. Well, with your mum, she's now in a new care home. She's been through this quite horrendous experience, and like you say, it must have been so hard with her not really understanding what's gone on. Have there been any long-term effects of this on your mum?
Well, definitely. I mean, we did see a decline in mum through that period. It's difficult to say whether that would have happened or not, but I think the one change that will always stick with me is the fact that mum would respond to the word mum before we were not allowed in, and now we call her by her first name because she went for so long not hearing that word.
Yeah.
So our fight is keep pushing now for Gloria's law. The difference with Gloria's law than the legislation that's been proposed now is that the legislation proposed now, which is actually a secondary legislation, is going to be governed by the Care Quality Commission, which means the onus is on the CQC. Providers won't have to breach if they won't have to report if they're breaching that legislation. And as I've said just now, it focuses on a visitor and not a carer. And you've picked up there that obviously there is a gulf, both important, but there is a gulf between the two. And
talk to us about the staff that were affected as well, because that's really what we're talking about here, because those staff members in those care homes worked so hard to look after those residents.
Didn't they just? And they were, initially they were going into a scenario that was frightening. the rest of us were told to stay at home, where these carers were actually getting up in the morning and going into an environment with lots of people, not knowing if they were going to catch the virus, take it home, never mind their concern for the residents as well. So yeah, absolutely, the impact was not just on the resident themselves and their loved ones, but on the carers and their loved ones, definitely. And we have to make sure that we've got the right regulation in place such that this can't happen again. And I don't think leaving it down to the CQC to monitor this is going to be good enough.
Well, we shall see what happens. Penny, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing your story and what you're trying to do at the moment. Penny Hutchinson from Halifax, campaigning for care home residents. Thank you so much, Penny. Her mum was in a care home during the pandemic. Do you have experience of this? What do you make of the inquiry? What needs to change? 81333 on the text, and you can tweet me at BBC Leeds.